From their ruthless battle strategy to the Praetorian Guard, an elite group of highly trained soldiers, today we look at 9 shocking facts about the Roman legion. 9. Discipline through fear. Spurred on by their total and utter defeat by the Gauls in 390 BC, the Romans began building the most effective, brutal, and fearsome fighting force the world has ever seen. Their influence and power ultimately projected them from Scotland to northern Iraq and into Africa. Any defeat suffered by the Romans produced an immediate retaliation. This professional military juggernaut rolled on with ruthless efficiency and with internal discipline strictly and violently enforced. A Roman soldier swore an oath to the Roman people, and the emperor the sacramentum, which stated he would do his duty under penalty of punishment up into including death. The general held the power of capital punishment at all times and under any circumstances. Summary execution, it is called. The centurions, the mighty officers supervising the rank-and-file legionnaires, would routinely whip the soldiers with vine branches. Tacitus, the Roman historian and Roman senator, wrote in his annals of this rough, commonplace treatment. He writes of one particularly compulsive centurion they called Cato Alterum, which means, bring me another. Cato Alterum would break one vine after the next on the backs of the legionnaires, and then shout, bring me another. The end of this violence came only when the severe centurion met his fate in a legionnaire's mutiny. Number 8. A soldier's meal. Fermentum, a sort of wheat porridge, was the perpetual feast of the Roman warrior. Legionnaires took great pride in the discipline of eating the same boring meal day in and day out. If deprived of this bland staple, they were offended and complained bitterly. They became unruly. Fermentum was simply what a civilized soldier ate. Eating meat or consuming alcohol before a battle was how the barbarians behaved. Roman soldiers weren't barbarians, and they would tell you so in no uncertain terms if you took away their fermentum. It might be monotonous, but anything besides this hearty grain was considered punishment. The generals knew this and used it to their advantage. Number 7. Penalties. A Roman soldier found guilty of dereliction of duty or the more serious charge of desertion would be beaten to death or stoned. This was the punishment of fusteriarium and was delivered by the soldiers whose lives he endangered in front of all the others. Other crimes eligible for this punishment included giving false evidence, unmanly actions, stealing from the camp, and an ancient form of 3 strikes and you're out for anyone convicted 3 times of the same offense. If found guilty of theft or treason, he would likely end up in a sack of poisonous snakes and tossed in a body of water. In the case of minor infractions of the strict military code, soldiers were subject to procuraria multi, or having deductions and fines taken from their pay, flogging in front of the legion, or a re-swearing of the sacramentum oath. A reduction in rations often occurred, or being forced to eat the demeaning barley instead of dignified wheat. A soldier could be reduced in rank, gratis diectio, or lose his benefits of long service. Militae mutatio meant being regulated to inferior duties or services, and munerium indictio was to have additional work tasks imposed. In practice, the commanders had ample leeway in what they chose to punish and how they decided to enforce it. Novel approaches to discipline arose over the centuries, especially in the later empire, as it became more corrupt. There is a story taken from the history of Augusta of the 4th century that claims Emperor Aurelian, as the legion commander before he became emperor, once ordered a convicted rapist tied to 2 drawn-together trees, had the trees' retaining ropes cut, and the man ripped in 2 pieces. Number 6. Battle strategy. The structure of the Roman army was flexible, strong, and brilliant. 4,800 soldiers in one legion. One legion was 10 cohorts. 10 cohorts was 6 centuries, and 1 century was 80 soldiers. 1 centurion commanded each century. This formal structure allowed the generals to assemble and deploy their forces efficiently in whatever numbers they needed for the situations that arose on the field. The troops drilled and practiced both in small and large formations relentlessly day after day. The ability to pre-plan attacks and defense strategies led to a winning master strategy that eventually dominated half the globe. Most hostile engagements would begin at a distance. Catapults would hurl iron bolts and giant boulders at the foe, wreaking havoc from beyond the barbarians' reach. Next, the troops would advance. A type of wooden javelin with a long iron head called pilum would be launched by hand by the Roman soldiers who were just about ready to charge. The pilum was designed to bend upon impact so that it could not be taken and thrown back at the Romans, eliminating that threat and increasing Romans' defensive posture. Each cohort, broken into its fighting units, would stand shoulder to shoulder in tidy rows and columns, swords out, creating a wall of annihilation. As it approached the usually poorly unorganized and undisciplined enemy, holding their shields in front of them or beside them, which covered them from throat to foot, wearing an iron helmet and presenting a sword-spiked facade, the Romans were an almost impenetrable tank that moved, unstoppable, through the throngs of barbarians, flesh and blood. Few native villages, towns, and cities could resist such an organized and rehearsed attack from such a cold and lethal machine. Number 5. Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar, the Roman emperor who was famously murdered on the Ides of March, as told by William Shakespeare, made his mark as a Roman general by wiping out millions of so-called barbarians. He started with the Celtic Helvetii. Caesar attacked the Helvetii on a Swiss plateau, fighting them as they tried to migrate there from Gaul. Some records indicate that over 250,000 soldiers lost their lives. From there, Caesar marched towards Gaul, an ancient region in Western Europe that covered many modern-day countries including France, Belgium, and Switzerland. The Roman army destroyed and looted every town they found in their path. By the time he was finished and Gaul conquered, over 1 million Celts were wiped out and 500,000 enslaved. The Helvetii were not well organized. These Celts were rich in gold but peaceful. They didn't stand a chance against the machine. Number 4. Taking booty. Eliminating every living soul in a village, town, or city an army has just conquered makes it easy to steal everything in it. And many of the poor men who volunteered to join the legion often did so just waiting for this moment to come. After the order was given to stop the bloody massacre, the pillaging began. Fully one half of the soldiers would sack the town, looting and taking whatever they could find, while the other half performed their assigned duties or guarded the looters. Corpses were picked over, buildings ransacked, art absconded with. Everything not nailed down taken, and even then, it was probably removed. They gathered up anything of value. The legions divided the loot among the individuals. All the individuals, even those on guard or doing other duties. Everyone got cut in on the spoils of battle. Everyone was happy. Insurrection remained at a minimum, and each warrior could accumulate wealth as long as he stayed loyal to the empire and kept fighting, winning, and following orders. Number 3. Crucifixion. The Roman legion usually accused anyone who resisted total domination by the empire of conspiracy to rebel or sedition. Either charge was a capital offense. The Romans had a special way of dealing with them: crucifixion. Most people in modern Western culture know of crucifixion from the story of Jesus' death on the cross. He died from the Roman method of crucifixion as it existed since antiquity. The doomed convict is forced to carry a heavy wooden cross to the crucifixion site, all while being publicly scourged, abused, spat upon, and otherwise humiliated. The victim is then tied or nailed to the cross and left to hang until dead. The end usually comes from exhaustion or asphyxiation. One of the main reasons to crucify someone, or in the Romans' case, tens of thousands of people, was to terrorize and dissuade others from engaging in the kind of behavior that gets one crucified. This showcase of terror was rather convincing, in that nobody wants a slow, painful, excruciating, meaning out of crucifying, death. The gross humiliation of the crucifixion is also a deterrent. The condemned is usually naked and vulnerable. As said earlier, this is an ancient and brutal method of execution and continues in parts of the world even today. Number 2. The Praetorian Guard. Destined to become one of history's most famous and infamous private fighting forces, the Praetorian Guard was a do-whatever-was-necessary band of hand-picked soldiers whose primary job description was to serve as bodyguards to rulers of Rome. The Praetorian Guard would also step in and perform any duties the emperor or Caesar deemed expedient, whenever ordered to do so. If they needed to go undercover as secret spies, so be it. Or on other occasions, perhaps to serve as administrative envoys. Then that is what they did. Their sole purpose was to further the aims and goals of the Roman Empire. This they did with brutal efficiency. The roots of the Praetorian Guard began as early as the 2nd century BC, during the time of the Roman Republic. Elite groups of soldiers protected the army generals and famous leaders such as Mark Antony and Scipio Africanus. After Augustus had become emperor, the Praetorian Guard was officially established in 27 BC and remained influential for over 300 years. One of the tasks which fell to the Praetorian Guards was that of firefighter. They were known to supplement the local vigils, who were assigned firefighting duties for the city of Rome whenever things seemed to get out of hand. The guards are even known to have helped during the infamous fire which blazed on while Nero fiddled and Rome burned. They were a tough bunch. They performed at the Roman Colosseum as gladiators, taking part in the brutal slaughters. The games also included wild beast hunts and sea battles in which the Colosseum was filled with water so that ships and sailors could fight as on the open sea. For the elites of the elite, within the Praetorian Guard, espionage was a prime asset. So was intimidation. Combined with the ability to arrest or eliminate just about anyone they desired, they had a reputation difficult to ignore. These speculatores were undercover operatives that served the Caesar. Their job was to infiltrate public gatherings, such as at the Colosseum, and arrest anyone who insulted or criticized the Caesar. Their job also included surveilling and occasionally killing suspected enemies of the state, and anyone thought to be a threat to their power or that of the Caesar. Number 1. For money. Over the centuries, the Praetorian Guard became so powerful and so influential that it became instrumental in choosing the next emperor of Rome in the event of the loss of the reigning emperor. Eventually, the Praetorian Guard decided, along with corrupt legion generals, was that a gift was to be made to the guard and the generals whenever a new emperor arrived. It was to be a very substantial gift, as these were highly important and influential men. The offering was meant to secure the support and loyalty of the Roman legion and its power structure. Clearly, this was a bribe. They called it the donativum. The size of a potential new forthcoming bribe often made it necessary for the legion and the guard to ensure that an emperor, a new emperor, be put in place instead of the current one. Since the Praetorian Guard was the current emperor's protection, they were in a perfect position to effect his removal through assassination whenever they wanted a new donativum. Seating new emperors became commonplace. Soon, the size of the donativum became a sole determining factor as to whom would become the next emperor of Rome. Emperor Claudius is thought to have paid the largest donativum in Rome's history. A Roman soldier swore an oath to the Roman people, and the emperor the sacramentum, which stated he would do his duty under penalty of punishment up into including death. The general held the power of capital punishment at all times, and under any circumstances. Summary execution, it is called. The centurions, the mighty officers supervising the rank-and-file legionnaires, would routinely whip the soldiers with vine branches. Tacitus, the Roman historian and Roman senator, wrote in his annals of this rough, commonplace treatment. He writes of one particular, from their ruthless battle strategy to the Praetorian Guard, an elite group of highly trained soldiers. Today we look at 9 shocking facts about the Roman legion. Ultimately projected them from Scotland to northern Iraq and into Africa. Any defeat suffered by the Romans produced an immediate retaliation. This professional military juggernaut rolled on with ruthless efficiency and with internal discipline strictly and violently enforced. 9. Discipline through fear. Spurred on by their total and utter defeat by the Gauls in 390 BC, the Romans began building the most effective, brutal, and fearsome fighting force the world has ever seen. Their influence and power